Right now, there are over 1 billion people on this planet who smoke cigarettes, pipes, cigars, hookah, vapes, and we think of smoking as this modern habit, something invented by big tobacco, marketed through ads, a product of the 20th century. But what if I told you that humans were intentionally inhaling smoke hundreds of thousands of years before the first cigarette was ever rolled? Because the history of smoking doesn't start in Virginia in the 1600s, it starts with fire, and it starts much, much earlier than you think. To understand when humans started smoking, we have to go back roughly 1.5 million years to a species called Homo erectus, our ancient ancestor who first learned to control fire, not to smoke, but to cook, stay warm, and keep predators away. Yet, if you sit around a fire every single day, you breathe in smoke constantly, and researchers studying ancient hearth sites have found charred bones, ash layers, and burned plant material suggesting that early humans were deliberately building and maintaining fires in enclosed spaces. And one of the most remarkable of these sites is Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back about 1 million years, where the evidence makes clear that our ancestors were living and breathing in smoke-filled environments long before they ever made a conscious choice to inhale it. But somewhere along the line, something shifted, because the leap from accidentally breathing smoke to deliberately seeking it out is a big one. And it likely happened in stages, first for survival, since many plants, when burned, release compounds that repel insects, meaning ancient humans living in tropical regions may have sat in smoke clouds intentionally just to escape mosquitoes. And second, far more fascinatingly, because of what certain plants do to the brain when they burn, since wild tobacco grows natively across the Americas, cannabis exists across Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent, and dozens of other psychoactive plants were available to prehistoric hunter-gatherers who, one day, burned a pile of wild vegetation for warmth and found themselves feeling profoundly, inexplicably different hours later. Calmer, more alert, perhaps even seeing visions, and that experience would have been sacred, and so begins the chapter of smoking not as addiction, but as ritual. Across virtually every ancient culture on Earth, independent of one another, smoke played a central role in spiritual life. In the Americas, tobacco was considered a sacred gift from the gods among the Maya, the Aztecs, and dozens of indigenous nations. In Siberia, shamans used cannabis and herbs to enter altered states and carry prayers into the spirit world. In ancient Egypt, the word for incense literally translated to divine fragrance, something the gods themselves were believed to breathe. And recent archaeology has pushed this history back further than anyone expected. Because in 2019, researchers announced the discovery of residue inside ancient braziers in the Pamir Mountains of western China, dating back 2,500 years, containing confirmed traces of THC, meaning people were deliberately burning cannabis at ceremonially significant moments. And then in 2021, evidence emerged from a 3,500-year-old Canaanite temple in Israel, where altar residue contained both cannabis and frankincense, suggesting that sacred smoke was filling temples during religious ceremonies thousands of years before the modern world. Tobacco itself has its own remarkable timeline. The earliest confirmed use of tobacco by humans dates back at least 12,000 years, based on the discovery of tobacco seeds at an archaeological site in Utah reported in a 2021 study in Nature Human Behavior, meaning that 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age was just ending and agriculture hadn't even been invented, humans were already using tobacco, and for thousands of years it spread through the Americas, woven into the culture of the Maya, the Aztec, the great civilizations of Mesoamerica, and the indigenous peoples of North America, so that by the time Europeans arrived in the 1400s and 1500s, the Taino people of the Caribbean had a word for the rolled tobacco leaves they smoked. Tobago, from which we get the word tobacco itself, and the Spanish and Portuguese who brought it back to Europe had no idea they were importing a tradition that was already ancient. The reason all of this felt so immediately rewarding to the human brain comes down to a molecule called nicotine, and a system in your brain that predates smoking by millions of years. Your brain has nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, part of how your nervous system communicates, involved in attention, memory, and arousal, and nicotine, when inhaled, binds to these receptors and triggers a release of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, producing within seconds a feeling of focus and calm. And here is the remarkable part. These receptors evolved long before tobacco existed. They are part of a fundamental biological system, and nicotine just happens to fit them perfectly like a key made for a lock that was already there, leading some researchers to propose the fire adaptation hypothesis. The idea that early humans who spent hundreds of thousands of years around smoke may have developed a sensitivity to nicotine that is essentially written into our biology, meaning the reason smoking feels instantly rewarding to so many people might be because, in some deep biological sense, our brains actually recognize smoke. For most of human history, this was something practiced rarely and reverently, in ceremony, in healing, in ritual, and the shift to mass, daily addictive cigarette smoking came shockingly recently because the first cigarette rolling machine was invented in 1880, and within decades, cigarettes went from novelty to global industry. And by the 1950s, the average American smoker was consuming more nicotine in a single afternoon than most ancient shamans would have encountered in a month, turning the sacred plant into a product and producing the lung cancer, heart disease, and addiction that followed, making it one of the great ironies of human history that something which began as a rare, reverent practice connecting people to the divine and to each other around a fire at the edge of the ancient world became, through industrial scale, one of the most destructive habits humanity has ever known. So when did ancient humans start smoking? The honest answer is we don't know exactly, but we know that smoke has been part of human life for over a million years. We know that intentional ritualistic use of psychoactive smoke goes back at least 2,500 to 3,000 years with hard archaeological evidence and very likely much further. We know that tobacco specifically has been used for at least 12,000 years, and we know that the impulse to inhale smoke, to feel something shift in the brain, to feel more connected, more present, more altered, is not a modern weakness or a flaw. It is one of the oldest human desires we know of, and what changed wasn't the desire. What changed was the scale, and the industry built around it.